The Tim Crowley Show. The Tim Crowley Show. The Tim Crowley Show.
Welcome into the Tim Crowley Show, and at long last, the worst kept secret in the NFL no longer has to be talked about as such. A.J. Brown is a New England Patriot, and there's so much to break down about this massive move in New England. I'm Tim Crowley. Thanks so much for tuning back in. It was only right to bring out someone from the Patriots beat to come chop it up and see what A.J. Brown is going to bring the Patriots in 2026 and beyond. Mike Kadlick is here. He covers the Patriots for CLNS, also does some NFL for Sports Illustrated as well. Mike, so great to finally talk to you, and just diving in, how nice is it to not have to talk about A.J. Brown anymore in this hypothetical like everyone had to do for the last 3 months?
Yeah, it's Tim. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm happy to join you here and talk some Patriots football. And as far as that goes, yeah, it felt like, as you said, it was the worst kept secret in the NFL. This was coming. Really, I feel like since the Patriots swung and missed on attempting to sign Alec Pierce from the Colts in this offseason, it kind of felt like this was the follow-up move for it. Had to wait until June 1st for the salary cap implications. So, now it's fun because we were kind of talking about it, and every week it was just like, all right, well, what can A.J. Brown do? Or is this going to happen? Is it not going to happen? What is the compensation going to be? And we were kind of banging our heads against the wall trying to talk about it, and now he's finally here. You can finally actually dive into what he can bring to this offense, which is the most exciting part, right? You look at where they were last season and what they had to improve on from losing that Super Bowl. Obviously, the wide receiver room, helping protect Drake Maye. And I think they've done both of those really well, and I think this, obviously, the A.J. Brown move is just sort of the last piece to that offseason puzzle. So,
just thinking back, like covering the last few years, and this is not to take away from Steph Diggs, and obviously it was fantastic in 2025, and still becomes a 1,000-yard receiver. But just think of how many I don't even know if you can call them upper echelon receivers, because maybe even some of the guys that we're looking at were not in their prime anymore. But just thinking of like all the years where it was, DeAndre Hopkins coming in for a visit, or trying to get Calvin Ridley here, or, swinging and missing on Brandon Ayuk, which probably is now a blessing in disguise.
Right.
Just what does that say about where they're at after, this has not been a team that hasn't tried to get, a top receiver in here for whoever's been a quarterback for the last, call it 3-4 years. Just what does it say to finally be able to get that done and do it probably in the best window that they could with, the talent that A.J. Brown brings to a team with where the Patriots are at?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what we saw from the Celtics, maybe like close to 10 years ago, where they had those number 3 picks and everyone thought like, oh, they're going to go get Jimmy Butler, or they're going to go turn this into another superstar, and they're going to kind of try and build this thing on the fly. And then it didn't happen. They waited it out. They used the picks, obviously get Brown and Tatum, and we see where we're at. And then they finally, and then this one didn't work, but the example to me is like, they finally went and traded for Kyrie Irving and said, this is going to be the final piece to our puzzle. We feel like we're now ready to actually go, and win this thing and compete. And again, that didn't work. But I think, looking back at all those other acquisitions that were rumored, DK Metcalf, another one from last offseason, and the other one, the other ones you mentioned with Ridley and Ayuk and all those guys, and Hopkins quite literally in the Patriots building at one point, taking a visit. Felt like that one was going to get across the finish line. It didn't. But those teams, obviously, as we know now, weren't ready for just a wide receiver one to come in and change all the fortunes. They went 4-13 a handful of times, 8-9 with Bill Belichick. And I don't know if maybe the front office, and I don't know this, I'm merely speculating here, but maybe the front office didn't get those across the finish line because they didn't think the time was right. They tried to, the price went too high. Obviously Ridley was close and what have you, and they had the trade offers there for Ayuk. But long story short, it didn't happen, and now it feels like, okay, this is the one that actually makes the most sense. You made it to the Super Bowl. You got there. You're really close, and now the team looks at themselves and says, okay, yes, we're still building, and we still have first-round picks, a first-round pick in 2027, for example, but they look at that 2028 first-round pick, and obviously the 5th next year, which is just kind of the sweetener in the deal, and say, okay, this is our time, this 2 to 3 year window, Drake Maye on a rookie contract, and, let's go try and get this thing over the hump, if you will. And I think A.J. Brown is that final piece that does that.
Somewhere buried in the archives is the legendary picture of Matthew Judon with his food package and DeAndre Hopkins standing on the logo in the locker room.
I'll never forget that day. We were in a complete tizzy thinking it was going to happen. And I think I went on radio that night and it was just like, we were on like DeAndre Hopkins watch and then nothing happened. And he obviously went elsewhere. But I think this is definitely a better prize.
In again, just talking about where those guys were at when they were discussed coming to New England, it, it's interesting to see where people are viewing kind of what AJ brings at this point because there is the conversation of like, oh well, he's going to be 29 in a few weeks, and what's the shelf life of a receiver at this point that has had the medicals that have scared a couple of teams off, but then it also feels like the flip side of he's not 30 yet. He continues to put up 1,000 yard seasons on the regular. Where do you view kind of where he's at this point. Again, is it the prime? No, the Eagles probably got that, but this is
Right.
still what should be a perennial 1,000 yard receiver for a couple more years.
Yeah, 100%. I think he's, a fringe top 10 guy when you look at, placing him within the rest of the league. And he's someone who you mentioned, Philly probably got his prime, right? Those first couple of years when they, went to a Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl, he was, in that upper echelon of talents. And he's maybe fallen off a little bit, Tim, but I don't think it's anything. At least last season was more so the environment he was placed in with the Kevin Patullo Eagles offense, and the friction that had become that sort of took place with him and Jalen Hurts. I just don't think it was the right fit for him in that time. Now, you talk about the knee issue that has come up over the last couple of weeks or months now, and apparently the Rams. That's one of the reasons why they ended up not trading for Brown, was because they were nervous about the knee. That's been an issue since his time in Tennessee. That's one of the reasons why the Titans decided to trade him and not extend him. And AJ said it on on Tuesday when we were down there that I basically in not quoting him exactly, but I show up, I post, I play every single game just about, even though I deal with this knee issue. I've had it drained a couple times and what have you, and I'm not worried about it, is basically what he said. And so as far as how his game translates and what they're getting, I liken it to like a Stefon Diggs, this year, where he wasn't at his best. And I think Brown's going to be better than Diggs, don't get me wrong. But similarly, like Diggs, his prime was past him, but he kind of transformed his game into an outside game-breaking, play-with-speed receiver to a more underneath, trustworthy guy. Drake May can find him in pockets and zones, and he's seen so much football in his day that he's a more cerebral player and can kind of match up himself and stem a cornerback and get himself open and get 9, 10, 11 yards on a on a chunk play or whatever. And I think that's probably what you're going to see with AJ Brown, where he may not be lined up outside at the X all the time running go routes and posts and making these home run plays, but they'll move him around, they'll find matchups, they'll get him lined up against linebackers and safeties and try and get him in advantageous positions, which is what Josh McDaniels has loved to do anyway. So, it may not be the 100%, I guess, AJ Brown that was his the best player in Philadelphia, but you're still getting a really good talent, and I think ultimately it's worth it. And you said it too. He's 28 now. He turns 29 later this month. That's 2 years younger than the Stefon Diggs the Patriots got last season. So there's a lot more left in the tank than even what we saw from Diggs last year, and that was obviously a really good addition as well.
So much will be made of the connection with Vrabel, obviously, connected for 3 years in Tennessee together. Where I think it's interesting to dive into that is I remember this being a narrative when Vrabel was hired last year, and I think it does fit to an extent with AJ as well, in the sense of what can the ceiling of a Mike Vrabel team be when he's now working with probably the best quarterback he's had, as a head coach, because and that crossover comes back to it now of, okay, they got to an AFC Championship game with Ryan Tannehill. For AJ Brown, it's going from that offense with kind of Tannehill and some rotating quarterbacks at the end to then being in Philly. And the Jalen Hurts thing is interesting because I do think when you're talking about what fits a receiver best, it probably is having Drake May throwing you the football, but that's also not to take away from Hurts because we saw two borderline masterpieces in the Super Bowl.
Unbelievable.
Right, so that's the hard part of this is you don't want to be like, okay, well, this is a totally different tier of quarterback he's going into.
Sure.
But in the sense of, what kind of offense is going to benefit A.J. Brown, it feels like this is the one that hasn't been there for him before because it has been a group that can make plays through the air. But, you're relying on two, sensational top of their generation running backs when,
right.
When it was Henry in Tennessee
Henry
or
and
Saquon.
now.
Right.
Sure.
So when you look at that now, is there maybe different potential that is going to get scratched for AJ for the first time, just given the benefit of what he'll be in this offense?
Yeah, I think, and I alluded to it a little bit before, but just the quarterback play, which again I know you mentioned it, and I give Jalen Hurts his flowers, like it's sensational in the Super Bowl, and I was looking back on it the other day, just how dominant he was. 3 rushing touchdowns, making plays that like dagger in the Chiefs' hearts down that throw to Devontae Smith, like filthy. So I don't want to take anything away from him, but clearly it was not working towards the end there. This season was kind of the cherry on top. And I mentioned too with, so better quarterback play with Drake, I think, but also really the offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels. I've said it on our show multiple times that I think Josh McDaniels is the best offensive play caller in NFL history. I would put him up against Andy Reid and Sean McVay and, all of those guys. Now, those are play calling head coaches, so it's a little different, but McDaniels couldn't cut it as a head coach, but he calls a really good offense. He understands, he evolves, he's able to change with skill sets. You saw it from Tom to Cam Newton to Mac Jones and now again to Drake Maye. So he takes what the quarterback can do best and really shapes the offense around that. So I think similarly now, A.J. Brown, he's seen a ton of football. We broke it down a little bit on our show with just some A.J. Brown film where the way he's able to, again, stem a receiver, stem a cornerback, and he did it against Pat Surtain. He understands where his feet are going, cuts underneath them, gets open on a curl route, and then is able to also dive the other way and get the first down. Like, he's seen it before. He understands the game. So for Josh McDaniels to then be able to understand, well, AJ knows where he's supposed to go, and he knows where, what he's supposed to be doing. Connect those things. And again, when you have multiple players in this system, guys like Hunter Henry, Reggie Gilliam, Romeo Doubs, Mac Hollins, that can do a bunch of different things and play a bunch of different positions. You can throw personnel groupings at any which way, get the matchup you want against the defense, and really let Drake and Josh cook. So I think there is a little. I don't know if it's necessarily a step above what we've seen AJ Brown at his peak, but it's definitely something different that we might never see before, and it's exciting because I think it can really unlock a different dynamic in the offense that they may not have had over the last couple of years.
This is certainly not to open up a can of worms and get the wrong narrative out about what he's going to be in 2026, but it does feel fair to say, and I present it to you, is this the best pure receiver acquisition they've had since Randy Moss?
It is. I've heard that multiple times, and like you said, it's unfair because it's not like we're putting it next to Randy Moss. I mean, they haven't really had this, right? This is so from then until now. I mean, I guess Stefon Diggs is another one that was really good. It made it happen, but I think this is a better acquisition than Diggs. And I think that just when you look at everything that comes with it as well, I mean, Randy Moss is obviously the best wide receiver in NFL history, in my opinion. I mean, Jerry Rice is obviously there as well, but he was so dominant, and he was there, or he came here at a time where he was kind of disgruntled in Oakland, and they shipped him off for a 4th round pick, and it was like, we just need to get this guy off our books. See you later. AJ similar. But also, they gave up a 1st rounder. Like, they're really going and there's a lot behind this, right? So this is a serious acquisition that the Patriots just made. And they haven't really, they haven't really gone and done this at wide receiver before. So I think it's Randy, it's AJ Brown, Stefon Diggs. And yeah, they haven't really gone and got their quarterbacks, that guy, since then. So yeah, I think that's fair to say that AJ is right up there.
And I think that's the way it has to be talked about, because it's not expecting 23 touchdowns and setting records this year. It is thinking about, and this can even be said for the back half of Brady's tenure here too, of how many times were there rumors of trying to go get him like a true X guy, or maybe finding one in the draft that just obviously didn't work out given the history of developing receivers here.
Never forget Antonio Brown as well. I will say that at the time, how good that was in that one game against Miami. Now, off-field issues, shit hit the fan, and for good reason.
Yeah.
Can I swear on this program?
Yeah.
Okay. Shit hit the fan, and it didn't work. But on field, Antonio Brown was sensational, and I think he's even above AJ Brown as far as level of wide receiver you were getting at the time. But that didn't work for good reason anyway.
Isn't that always going to be one of the bigger what ifs? Because I even think of. You could probably help with the timeline. I think of how deep the receiver chart went right before the start of the season. I'm trying to remember if he was on the 53-man and then pulled off. But, Demaryius Thomas was in the room that preseason too. And I just think of, you going 4 deep with, you can run out sets on the field that could include Edelman, Antonio Brown, still Josh Gordon, who was productive for the start of 19, and then had Demarius stayed there. Like that's mind-boggling what that
It
would have
is.
been, and knowing how it went. The frustrating part is watching it go from that, at least on paper, for like literally a blink, because obviously
Yes.
we had three of four for one game, but never the four of them. And just thinking of how the offense was talked about with that roster construction in September to what December was, where Tom Brady has nobody that can get open. It's guys that are trying to build a name in the NFL. A lot of young players that don't have trust. Edelman's 1,000-yard receiver, but he's getting doubled now in December because they know he can't go anywhere else. It's mind-boggling to think of how differently in the span of 2 months that offense got talked.
It was gone, and then it was gone, and then Tom was out, and then see you later. And they, ironically enough, they lose to Mike Vrabel's Titans that same season. So yeah, it was they pushed their chips in, I think, as much as they could at that point. I think Antonio Brown was the last straw, if you will, the kind of, all right, let's try this and see what happens. And there's that famous picture of them sitting on the sideline in Miami, and it's all four of them lined up. It's like the fact that this was an NFL offense for one game, and they spanked Miami that game too. So, but yeah, it did. It crumbled very quickly, and obviously, history, we've seen it. What has happened since then? But yeah, that was definitely a big what if, and I guess we could throw Josh Gordon in that mix of wide receiver acquisitions since Randy Moss. Another one where off-field issues were, was his detriment, but he was really good here for a couple of years. He was pretty reliable as well. And then it just, it obviously didn't work out. But no, AJ Brown is it's definitely an exciting one, and I think I put it number 2 behind.
We've kind of bounced around Diggs, and we can, have this one question and done about him now. Obviously, still on the market. His, was not guilty in his legal cases. It is interesting to see how the fan base is still treating this, and even some of the media around town is too. People kind of freaked out because that picture of AJ in a Patriots uniform, like before practice, but like the photoshopped one, liked by Steph Diggs. And then you have kind of that teaser clip from the Sports Hub put out yesterday of like, oh, don't throw the jerseys away yet. Who are we talking about? There are people that are for bringing him back, and there are people that are against it for the sake of you already have a lot of mouths to feed within that receiver room. When it comes to a potential Stefon Diggs reunion, because for all intents and purposes, while he's out there, it's always possible. In your opinion, would it be wise for the Patriots to bring Stefon Diggs back into this receiver room?
In my opinion, no. I think the wide receiver room is set, where it is right now. You mentioned mouths to feed. I think there's a lot. You bring in Romeo Doubs at a good number as well, which I think, like it or not, that kind of has to factor in. You paid him a lot of money. You expect a lot out of him, production on the field. Same with A.J. Brown, right? That's another one. He's going to be making a lot of money. You went and acquired a first-round pick. So those two guys, that duo, should be who you center your offense around. And when you look at a guy like Stefon Diggs, yes, he kind of threw fits when he was with Minnesota a little bit, and then obviously Buffalo. But ever since then, in Houston and here, he played his role, he did his job, and he didn't, make necessary fuss. But for him to go even from last year as the Patriots, de facto wide receiver 1, if you call it, to now the third, maybe fourth option when you factor in the tight ends and running backs as well. Like, I just wonder, A, how on board he would be with that, but B, how the offense would even be structured and look like. Like, you're putting either Dobbs or Diggs or Brown on the bench way too often than I think you would really want to. So, now, again, if they do it and they say, look, let's just load this thing up, we'll run 5 wide all the time. We just lost a tight end in Julian Hill, so we're going to kind of have to change our identity, not run the football as much and lean into the passing game. If the price is right and they can make it work, I trust Drake Maye and Josh McDaniels to make, that three-headed monster at wide receiver work. But to me, I just don't see it. I don't think it makes a ton of sense. You cut him for a reason. I don't think, and this is just speculation as well, but I don't think that reason was the legal case. I think that reason was because the money he was owed and what you thought the way you were going to kind of rebuild your wide receiver room. So they've done that now with Dobbs and Brown. I just don't think there's enough room for him. So, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And I think that as excited as Patriots fans may be getting, I just don't see it, getting across the finish line or happening.
We've talked a lot about like what's gone on around AJ and maybe the history that it took in terms of receivers to bring him here. Now that he is in uniform, you've obviously got to watch him the last few days down
Mhm.
at OTAs. What does he do to this offense to make them, not just a flash in the pan in the AFC last year, but a team that's going to be around and contending for a window that's open?
Yeah, I think when you look at, again, the room as a whole last year compared to this year, you've swapped out Diggs for two guys in Brown and Dobbs who have, not to say Diggs hasn't, but made clutch plays, at the highest level. I mean, Romeo Dobbs is a monster, or was a monster in big moments for the Packers. I mean, gets open, first downs, third downs converted to first downs, late in games. Love trusted him. He knew where to be, the right time or whatever. And then A.J. Brown has obviously won at the highest level, been to Super Bowls, won Super Bowls, and performed in Super Bowls. So I think when you mix in the offensive line improvements that they made, you hope Will Campbell gets healthy, you draft Caleb Lomu, you bring in Elijah Vera Tucker, and then you add some much more reliable wide receivers around Drake Maye, and you hope that he doesn't get hurt and bum up his shoulder again this season because of the offensive line and being able to have more guys reliable out there. I think it just, I know that last season, a lot of it, I will say, had to do with the schedule, and they were able to get there with relative ease, I would say. I mean, no regular season is easy, but they were able to beat up some teams. They got a good draw. Jarrett Stidham plays for Bo Nix, what have you. So, there's something to be made there. But I think this team is still really good. The pieces they've added this offseason have taken them from what was a flash in the pan Super Bowl appearance to a team that can compete at the top of the AFC for at least the next 2 or 3 years. Wait and see what happens with the A.J. Brown situation and kind of where, your money goes with Christian Gonzalez and Drake Maye. But this is definitely a win now team because of A.J. Brown. And I think that should excite Patriots fans because they've, that was sort of the last puzzle piece that they needed to make this offseason from when they lost in San Francisco to a success, and shows, okay, they can get back there and do it again.
I'm sure that you've talked about it on your shows as well. You kind of you probably had the ability to kind of incorporate AJ into this, given how long this has been talked about in terms of viewing what the team is going to be, whether in free agency after the draft. Sitting here now in June with OTAs going on, do you have a record prediction for where they go in 2026, and how do you think this season ends? Whether it or put it this way, what round do you think this ends for this Patriots team?
Let's see. When the schedule came out, I think I had them at 11-6. That's 17, right? Yeah, 11-6. I think Buffalo wins the division again. Patriots get in at 11-6 in the wild card. And look, Patrick Mahomes will always scare the crap out of me. He's the second best quarterback in history besides Brady. I fully believe that. He's back. He'll be healthy. So the Chiefs always scare me in the AFC. Buffalo, sorry, I can't be convinced. So I look at the rest of it. Baltimore's going to be much better. Cincinnati's going to be much better. So, you're going to have dogs in the playoffs out there. So that's going to be tough. So I'll say they win a round. They get to the AFC Championship game and they lose to Kansas City. That'll be my prediction here. So I think they can definitely get back to the title game. Call it a coin flip against whoever gets there. But for a prediction, I'll say they lose in the AFC Championship game.
Giving us great content to run on December 21st when
exactly.
we meet on Monday Night Football. Last one for you, and again, this is kind of fun to get to dive into, where your career's at, and a special one for the Patriots beat last year. Just take me through, because I know you guys went out, were out there a lot. What was covering a Super Bowl season like, specifically being out for a Super Bowl week in a different Brady, in a post Brady era? What was covering Super Bowl week like for you, and how excited are you to cover this team coming up in 26?
Yeah, a dream come true. It was crazy. Never thought I would be at a Super Bowl. I found a 5th grade yearbook clip of mine. One of my would love to do something, whatever, was go to the Super Bowl. I didn't think it was going to be as a media member, but it was just as a fan because I love football. So somehow I was able to accomplish that. It was insanely fun. It was wild because, like you said too, it wasn't a Brady era team. It was a new Patriots, and the buzz was okay, are they really going to be able to do this again? Are they really going to be able to build another dynasty again and be here, every time? And going from the end of what was a tumultuous Gerard Mayo season, 4-13, fired after 1 year, to all of a sudden, okay, well, they do have the quarterback. They did just hire one of the best head coaches. I view him now as one of the best head coaches at the time. He was obviously fired in Tennessee, took a year off, whatever. But I think, Vrabel's up there within the top 5 or 10 in the sport. To just be able to turn it around like that, the whole season kind of did just go so fast and was a blur because they just kept winning and making it happen and made it look so easy that all of a sudden I was sitting in, at Mile High Stadium watching the sun or the snow come down, and I'm like, holy shit, they're going back to the Super Bowl. We booked tickets to San Francisco. We flew out like a couple, the next week. And like you said, we were out there all week, and it was wild. It was super fun. A great experience, and we shall see if I'll be able to do again. But definitely fun to, as the team, the Patriots I grew up watching and rooting for, to kind of transition into now covering them and watching them in a new era. It's insane. It's a dream come true, and I wouldn't replace it for anything else.
So much to look forward to for this Patriots season, especially now that A.J. Brown is here. It is no longer hypothetical. You can watch clips of him in a Patriots uniform in practice, and sooner rather than later, we're seeing him in game action in just a few months with all the fun that training camp brings leading up to the season. And Wednesday night opener, is that still getting weird for you to say?
Yeah, it's odd.
Yeah.
I get it. And it doesn't bother me as much at the start of the season because they've had all the rest and whatever. But the Wednesday games, the holidays throughout the season, the Thanksgiving Eve game it's odd to me. Football shouldn't be played on Wednesday, and I get why they had to do it with the broadcast rules and the game in Melbourne or whatever. But yeah, a Wednesday night opener is definitely an odd one.
Wednesday night football should always be reserved for Trace McSorley on NBC in the middle of COVID, and that's
yes.
Should be a really fun Patriots team to watch moving forward. We're going to have plenty of more A.J. Brown coverage the next couple of weeks and really dive into all the hype that he has brought to New England. Big thanks to Mike Kadlick for coming on the show, and best of luck with your coverage coming up with OTAs and minicamp, and then obviously a big start with training camp coming up later this summer.
Thanks, Tim. Super fun. Appreciate you having me.
I'm your host, Tim Crowley. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
The Tim Crowley Show. The Tim Crowley Show. The Tim Crowley Show.